This presentation looks at the history of the development of management systems and the key elements of a good system. Why do we need them? To see why they've developed and become essential for efficient, safe work, we need to look at how attitudes have changed. If we look back around 40 years, accident rates were high and people were starting to think that something should be done about this. So, initially, technical improvements were made, with national and then international technical standards being developed. People made conscious efforts to ensure operating and maintenance procedures were in place and started to carry out risk assessments for the work that they were doing. Now, if your facility uses well-established proven processes with no unusual features and only a few hazards, it may seem acceptable to base your operation on recognised codes and standards, but most operations in the hazardous industries aren't like that. It became clear that an organised method of controlling activities was needed. We'll come back a bit more to that background later. But we all must remember that having a system in place is not enough. We need to ensure that people know, understand and are committed to the aims of management systems, without ensuring that the requirements of a company's policies and systems and procedures are properly communicated, and that the way that the company operates fully supports them. The management system will not be effective. It's important to remember that the management system must take account of the needs of all stakeholders. The system expresses the way that the directors and managers wish the company to operate, but must be aligned with the views of shareholders and take account of the requirements of regulatory authorities and of the communities in which the company operates. In some situations, companies with different management systems will work together at the same location. In this situation, it's important to ensure the management systems of the companies involved are properly interfaced so that everyone is clear what systems and procedures apply to what activities. But now, let's go back a minute to the reasons for creating management systems. As with many advances in the hazardous industries, we need to remember that one of the key drivers was major accidents. This slide shows a number of the major accidents that occurred in the 1970s and 80s. Major chemical plant accidents at Flixborough and Severso and Bhopal, the nuclear accident at Chernobyl, and the offshore Piper Alpha fire and explosion. These incidents caused significant loss of life to people at the facility, to the public, and to people responding to deal with the accidents. Now, these accidents then led to responses from governments and from industry. Regulations were introduced that required facility operators to demonstrate clearly how their facility is operated, and to ensure that the arrangements they claim to operate are actually in operation and are well understood by the workforce. Also, international and industry standards for safety, quality and environmental management were introduced, all of which require effective management systems. Companies had procedures in place before management systems were adopted, but they did not normally form part of a structured way of managing all activities, and generally did not establish a management culture that could be applied consistently across the company. So, has the introduction of management systems prevented major accidents from occurring? Well, unfortunately no, and the Deepwater Horizon drilling rig disaster serves as an illustration of that. A key point here is that managers responsible for the drilling rig would have believed that they had an effective management system in place. And they did have a good management system, but the system was made ineffective by that key element that figures so frequently in accidents: people. This is where the importance of ensuring that the culture operating within a company is aligned with the expectations of the management system, and that this really hits home. This is a key point. The management system itself does nothing but give structure to a company's arrangements for managing its business safely and effectively. For a management system to meet its objectives, people throughout the company must believe in and work to the policies and procedures within the system. So let's take a look at what needs to be covered in a management system. There are many ways of illustrating management systems, but the content is generally similar. The basis of all models lies in the plan, do, check model, leading to corrective actions for continuous improvement. This slide shows a typical structure. So let's look briefly now at what each of the elements is about. First of all, leadership and commitment. Company management have to show their commitment to the system and work according to it. If it isn't clear right from the top of the company that management works in the way set out in its policies and expects this of everybody else, the system will fail. This is vital. There's no point in senior managers saying that safety is the first priority and then demanding production above all else in daily dealings with operational managers. Now, policy and strategic objectives. These are how senior management set the tone for the way that the company will operate. All the detailed procedures in the company are developed to comply with these high-level policies and objectives. You'd expect to see policies in areas such as safety and environmental management and sustainability, and these should describe the company ethos and set the tone for all the supporting procedures. Organisation, resources and competence. Here we need to ensure that the management system sets out an organisation with suitable numbers of competent and experienced people to manage and carry out the work effectively. This is a vital area. The organisation structure needs to be well thought out, and people need to be known to be competent. You can't just say people are competent. You need to be able to prove they've done the training and have the work experience and they're truly competent at what they're doing. Next element is risk evaluation and management, and this is a vital element in managing our risks. This is a very big subject and is covered in other presentations and training modules, but fundamentally we have to know what hazards face the company and how they'll be managed. This applies right down from very high-level hazards to those at the workplace. We must know that risk controls are in place and that those risk controls are effective. Planning standards and procedures, this is relatively self-explanatory, but this is at the heart of telling people what's expected of them. In today's complex working environment, proper planning and procedures are essential in ensuring that work is done safely and to the correct standards. So, implementation and monitoring. The previous sections have covered how to do the work. This is where we actually go out there and do the work that the company's in business for. Operational management procedures are required to ensure that work is done properly and that frequent checking is done to ensure that this is the case. And on a more formal basis, we come to audit. Monitoring is something you can do on a day-to-day basis, but audit, it's in today's world not enough just to say that we think everything is fine. We need to know, and often we may find that everything isn't as we think it is, or as we think it should be. So we need to do formal audits, and it's good to get third parties involved, as they may see things that people inside an organisation may not see, or may not want to see. The key purpose of auditing is to provide a feedback stream for correction and continuous improvement. And that feeds into a management review process where the results of auditing and incidents that have occurred and other key information is brought to board level for the board to assess whether the management system is working effectively. This is important stuff. The board and individual managers may be held legally responsible in the event of accidents occurring because the systems in place were inadequate to manage work safely. So they must review all the findings of what has become clear during the year and look at changes that are needed. So, we've looked briefly at how management systems are required to manage work effectively and safely and what the content of them is. And it's important to note that even though there may be a need for many procedures that define what needs to be done, management systems don't need to be complex. They need to be simple enough to be understood. Now, think about all of this. Life at work is complex and there's a lot to do. Many people are involved with different responsibilities for ensuring that hazardous facilities maintain technical integrity and are operated safely. Without an effective management system in place, a company cannot know that its arrangements for HSE management are suitable and sufficient for their operations. And remember that a system will never be effective unless the whole workforce understands the system and what is required of them, and believes in the company culture that the system defines.